I still wake up some nights thinking about that one room. My grandfather's old lake house was a sprawling disaster. And I'm not just talking about the half-finished renovation he'd been working on for years. We inherited it after his passing, along with a stack of dusty blueprints and a contractor's phone number scribbled on the fridge. My siblings and I had always assumed Grandpa must have had some kind of vision, a grand lakeside retreat where we could escape the city heat and spend summers swimming in the crystal-clear waters. But from the moment we stepped inside, it was clear something wasn't quite right. The floors creaked underfoot, and every window frame seemed to be held together with nothing more than twine and prayers. We exchanged worried glances. How had he managed to keep this place standing for so long? As we began to explore further, I stumbled upon a small room tucked away behind the kitchen. It was filled with what looked like salvage from an old hardware store. Rusty pipes, broken fixtures, and stacks of half-used plywood sheets. What caught my attention, though, was the single sentence scrawled across the back wall in black marker. I was going to fix this place before I died. Something about those words sent a shiver down my spine. It sounded like more than just a boastful claim. What had he been trying to hide? As we started tearing down walls and ripping up floorboards, we discovered some of the most creative renovation attempts anyone could imagine. Who knew you could use 2 drywall screws to hold up an entire staircase? Or that you'd ever need to install a separate water heater just for one toilet? I still don't know if I was right to confront the contractor when he stopped by to inspect our progress. But what really got me was his nonchalant attitude about the fact that Grandpa had installed a makeshift septic system using nothing more than a bunch of old PVC pipes and some rags. It's funny, looking back now, I think we were all so caught up in the excitement of restoring this place to its former glory that we forgot what made it special in the first place. The crumbling plaster, the warped wood floors, those were just signs of a history worth preserving. One thing I wish we'd known from the start is how many shortcuts and quick fixes Grandpa had taken over the years, like the time he managed to fix a leaky roof with nothing more than some tarps and a few rocks. Or when he traded in our old kitchen for one made out of particle board because, as he put it, it was cheaper. There's one detail that still doesn't add up. What happened to the original plumbing system? We thought we were replacing everything from scratch. But then I stumbled upon an old manual in the attic. It seemed like Grandpa had somehow adapted our grandfather's own designs for a lake house he'd built back in the 1940s. It took us weeks to untangle all these threads and figure out what was actually going on with this place. And even now, when I look at those blueprints and think about everything we learned during that chaotic summer, I just shake my head. Some stories you only tell once, like how Grandpa had to drain the entire lake when he first moved in, because it turned out his land deed didn't include a certain key piece of property. The last thing on our minds was what would happen if we actually finished renovating. Would anyone even want to come and stay here? As it turns out, though, that wasn't the problem at all. It was just starting over with someone else's vision. But as I'm standing here, looking around at the chaos we've created, I realize now that the real challenge wasn't even getting started. It was knowing when to stop. See, Grandpa had this, let's call it a thing, for knocking down walls and reconfiguring spaces without permission or any architectural sense, for that matter. He'd take these beautiful old beams and doors and just rip them out of their sockets like they were nothing more than decorative trim. I still remember the look on our contractor's face when he saw what we had to work with, like someone had taken a wrecking ball to the inside of a perfectly good house. He kept muttering something about as-built conditions and structural integrity, but I just gave him that reassuring smile, you know, the one that says, "Don't worry, buddy, we've got this." Little did I know he was right to be worried. As it turns out, Grandpa had not only torn down walls, but also replaced entire systems: plumbing, electrical, HVAC, you name it. He'd installed these fancy-schmancy water pumps that were supposed to make the whole place eco-friendly. But what they actually did was turn our kitchen into a perpetual sauna and our bathroom into a dripping faucet nightmare. We spent weeks trying to track down all these oddities, calling in experts left and right, getting more and more frustrated by the minute. It was like Grandpa had intentionally hidden clues around every corner, waiting for us to stumble upon them or not. And then there were the little things, like how he'd repositioned the doors so that they now opened into adjacent rooms instead of out onto the deck, or how he'd installed these weird little accents on the walls that looked suspiciously like makeshift door frames. It wasn't until we hired a structural engineer to take a closer look at the place that things started to fall into place. She walked around with this skeptical expression, taking notes and muttering under her breath, I swear. She was more interested in Grandpa's design philosophy than actual functionality. And then it hit us, Grandpa had been trying to create some sort of community space, a communal kitchen, a shared living room. He'd envisioned this whole new lifestyle for the lake house, where friends and family could come together, share meals, and just generally hang out. It was sweet in theory, But when you're actually trying to use these spaces, it's more like a chaotic game of musical chairs. And that's not even getting into the blueprints themselves, the ones I mentioned earlier. Those were actually just scraps of paper with rough sketches and notes scrawled all over them. Grandpa had written entire conversations with himself in the margins. Should we do this? No, 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 too many angles. Or, what if we use that old pipe for a bookshelf? It was like he'd been having a one-sided debate with his own subconscious. We finally finished renovating, but by then it was clear that our lake house wasn't exactly the social hub Grandpa had envisioned. I mean, who wants to spend their summer vacation navigating a maze of mismatched doors and dodgy plumbing? And yet, there's something about this place that still draws people in. Maybe it's the quirky charm. Maybe it's the sheer audacity of Grandpa's DIY dreams. Or maybe it's just the promise of a good story waiting to be told. People would come from all over, sit down at the kitchen table, and start digging through the drawers, searching for the one specific item that Grandpa had stashed away in his infamous junk drawer. Some claimed it was a vintage typewriter. Others swore it was a rare coin or a priceless family heirloom. But the truth is, most of those treasures were probably just worthless trinkets he'd picked up at garage sales or thrift stores. I remember one summer, our neighbor Mrs. Johnson came over and spent an entire day searching for her grandmother's old recipe book. She scoured every inch of the house, rummaged through every closet, and even got down on her hands and knees to examine the dusty corners under the furniture. And finally, just as she was about to give up hope, she spotted it tucked away in a hidden compartment above the kitchen cabinets, an old leather-bound book with yellowed pages and a faint scent of lavender. The thing is, none of those stories ever added up quite right. There were whispers of secret stashes and hidden passages, but whenever we tried to investigate further, the trail would go cold. It was as if Grandpa had left us a series of cleverly constructed puzzles, each one leading to another mystery that only he knew how to solve. We eventually learned to roll with it after all. The quirky charm of our lake house was part of its appeal. So we'd host these impromptu treasure hunts, and everyone would laugh and search together, pretending to believe in the tales of hidden riches and secret histories. But deep down, I think we were all just humoring Grandpa's eccentricities. And then one summer, when I was about 16, I stumbled upon something that changed everything. While sorting through a stack of old photographs in the attic, I found a note tucked away between two dusty albums, a hand-scrawled list with cryptic symbols, and what looked like a crude map. It was clear that this wasn't just some haphazard scribble. Grandpa had been planning something, but he'd never gotten around to sharing it with anyone. I still remember the feeling of my heart sinking as I realized that Grandpa's DIY dreams were only half the story. There was more to our lake house than met the eye, and I was determined to uncover what lay beneath the surface, even if it meant taking apart the entire house piece by piece. It started with a plan to update the kitchen, but one thing led to another, and before we knew it, every room was a work in progress. The walls were stripped down to the studs, exposing a labyrinth of cobwebs and old electrical wiring that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1970s. We found hidden rooms behind bookshelves and secret panels that swung open with a satisfying creak. It was like Grandpa had designed his own puzzle, and we were determined to solve it. As we tore through the walls, we uncovered evidence of every phase of Grandpa's renovation plans. Abandoned projects, scraps of fabric for upholstery, and mysterious tools that seemed to belong to an entirely different era. And then there were the strange symbols etched into the woodwork, a code that we couldn't decipher, but which sent shivers down our spines. As we pored over the symbols, trying to figure out what they meant, I started to feel like Grandpa was playing some kind of trick on us. Was he testing our mettle, or just messing with our heads? We scoured every inch of the house, searching for clues, but it seemed like we were no closer to cracking the code than when we first started. The symbols only appeared in a few scattered places, on a hidden panel behind a bookshelf, etched into the trim work of a single room, and even stenciled onto the back of an old door. It was as if Grandpa had deliberately scattered breadcrumbs for us to follow, but they led nowhere. One evening, while we were working late, my sister stumbled upon an old journal hidden away in a dusty corner of the attic. It belonged to Grandpa's own father, who'd built the original lake house back in the 1940s. As she flipped through its yellowed pages, her eyes widened with excitement and a little bit of fear. "Guys, come check this out," she called over, holding up the journal like it was a sacred relic. We gathered around, peering at the handwritten notes and sketches that filled its pages. They told a story of a family torn apart by disagreements, of struggles to make ends meet, and of a deep-seated sense of unease that lingered long after the building was finished. As we pored over the journal, it became clear that Grandpa's own renovation project wasn't just about updating an old house. It was a way for him to exorcise some dark memories from his family's past. Every detail, every choice, Every symbol etched into the woodwork was a deliberate attempt to erase what had come before and start anew. But as we read on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa had been playing with fire, tampering with forces he didn't fully understand, just like his father had all those years ago. We continued to work through the night, our flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls as we uncovered more and more of Grandpa's secrets. It was a roller coaster ride of emotions, from laughter at some of the more absurd design choices to despair when we realized that so much of what we'd been told about Grandpa's plans had been a lie. And yet, with each new discovery, I felt like we were getting closer to the truth, and also maybe a little bit further away. The final blow came when we stumbled upon an old construction plan hidden deep in one of the hidden rooms. It was dated from years before we'd ever thought Grandpa even owned this house. The blueprints showed a completely different layout, with multiple additions and modifications that seemed to defy logic, or at least our understanding of it. As I stared at the plans, a shiver ran down my spine. What had Grandpa been building, really? I remember asking myself over and over again, how could he have kept this from us? The more we dug, the more it seemed like every decision was made with one thing in mind: to drive a wedge between family members. But why? What had Grandpa hoped to achieve by turning his beautiful lake house into a twisted maze of corridors and dead ends? I still can't help but wonder if he'd been working on something else, something entirely separate from the renovations we'd been told about. As we pored over the blueprints, my sister pointed out the inconsistencies in the electrical wiring, while our friend noticed the irregularities in the plumbing. It was like Grandpa had taken every rule book and thrown it out the window. But what really caught my attention was a small note scribbled on one corner of the plan. Phase 2. Exterior modifications, with a single date circled. Months after we'd been told the project was finished, the more I looked at that note, the more I felt like I was staring into a puzzle with missing pieces. Had Grandpa planned all along to make major changes once he had our trust? And what did he mean by exterior modifications? Was it something as simple as repainting the deck, or was there something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface? The thought still sends shivers down my spine when I think about it. What would have happened if we'd been smart enough to catch on sooner? If we'd known what Grandpa was really up to?